This actually leaves great time for questions. And by the way, I again encourage Alberto and Daniela and also Elaine Martin to jump in with this conversation. But Bob, maybe to start you off with a question for you. You didn't introduce yourself with your full background, and I happen to know that you also worked on the virtual observatory in the past. And I think the virtual observatory is I think in the research data sharing space, I think the most used example of a wonderful way of data sharing that happened. Everybody's pointing to this example. And actually, it is actually a really, really successful project that actually did great data sharing. And it's almost the foundation of this whole open data movement, because people looked at that project and said, hey, we want to do that too. But I mean, this was way before the time that data management plans were ever written. So imagine yourself back when you did the virtual observatory project. Would it have helped to write a data management plan?
Good question. I hadn't really thought of things in that regard, because what we did with the virtual observatory was essentially assemble organizations, a group of the willing, who felt that we would do better astronomy as a community, both nationally and internationally, if we shared data much more readily. Most data in astronomy comes from major facilities. I've spent 30 years working at the organization that operates the Hubble Space Telescope, for example. And other major observatories, either ground-based or space-based, are very expensive instruments for which it's really essential to have a data preservation and data management infrastructure. So the data management plan coming from the individual researcher really was not such a major issue in astronomy, simply because data from the Hubble automatically moved into an online data archive, and all the data were calibrated and basically made science ready. So we're in a different sphere now, where we're really pushing these data management responsibilities onto the shoulders more of individual researchers and individual laboratories. So it's a rather different circumstance. So to answer your question, I don't think DMPs 22 years ago, when we started the virtual observatory, would have had a terribly big influence. But it's really because the nature of astronomy from other more bench-oriented sciences is quite different.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Maybe now to open the group a little bit. I mean, and I think it was actually a question or a challenge that Daniela said in her presentation. She said, citations are far better than DMPs because they're machine readable and they're available. And actually also from the audience, particularly Lauren Maxwell, I mean, she says, hey, can you talk about how you can make DMPs machine readable? Are there tools that exist for that? But maybe let's discuss both. I mean, should we just focus on citations? Should we focus on DMPs, or should we only focus on machine readable DMPs?
Well, machine readable DMPs, I think, are very important, even if they are not public. I get back to one of the points I made. In my position at NIST, I'm a service provider, and I need to be able to provide good service to anticipate data storage requirements and data dissemination requirements. So for me, having machine readable DMPs makes my job much easier, in that I can search across DMPs and find those that are going to be stressing our system in terms of data capacity or data velocity. So in that sense, DMPs are really valuable. There's still a lot of controversy over whether they should be public or not, because of this issue that you might describe in a DMP, which is intentional, not after the fact. You might betray some, intellectual property that you really don't want to share early on in a project. So we have to be very careful, I think, about whether we're going to require DMPs to become public. It might actually have an inadvertent effect of pushing good information underground if people are unwilling to have it be shared.
Thank you. And by the way, I want to correct myself because I said that Daniela stated that citations might be prioritized over data management, over data management plans. But what she actually said was data citations might be prioritized over data availability statements. But Daniela, feel free to jump into this discussion because I think it would be great to have everybody's view discussed here.
I'm not sure what the question is because I didn't say that first question.
Well, I think the question is maybe about data management plans. Do you think they would help if we start measuring them in your Make Data Count initiative?
I think the big priority for data management, and I'm not the right person to talk about it, is to use persistent identifiers and make them machine actionable so that they can eventually contribute downstream to that system of metrics.
Brilliant. Okay, so there's some great questions from the audience as well. So there's an anonymous person who says, it's interesting to note that the NIH has decided that program staff, rather than peer reviewers, will evaluate the suitability of DMPs. This reduces reviewer burden, but lends a worry about the extent of subject area knowledge. Bob, is that something you would like to discuss?
Yes, I've read that in the new NIH policy, and I will say I find it a challenging thing for the program staff at NIH to undertake. And it may not be just because of the need for very diverse domain knowledge, but also there's going to be a lot of need for pretty detailed technical knowledge and understanding of, say, in a particular subdomain, what repositories are available, what is their funding scheme, what is their sustainability plan. So it's going to require really extensive knowledge, and it might be, I don't want to openly, criticize here, but it might be better to think of a more collaborative or cooperative way to review DMPs or DSPs, because it's going to be certainly a big burden on the NIH program staff.
Right, thanks.
And also, let me add too. I think the benefit of engaging peer review panels in helping to review DSPs is also increasing awareness in our research communities that these are important. And the reviewers can see good DSPs and bad DSPs, and those proposals that have bad DSPs really ought to be subject to that community feedback that this is not acceptable anymore.
Great. Alberto, Daniela, or Elaine, do you want to add to that?
Just a quick note that what we're seeing, institutions are looking for a way to turn DMPs not just a document that you attach to your grant application or that you submit to the funder after you've gotten the grant, but also has a way of building data registries that can be used by the institution itself when they need, when there's, for example, there's the need for data retention. And as an institution, when you might be the entity that is actually archiving the data on behalf of the researchers, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you need to get access to that data for whatever reason. How do you know where the data has been stored? You either go through the papers or you have a system where you have stored your data management plans, and the data management plan is actually not just a document, it's actually piece of structured data that you can query, that you can report on, and that's enabled mostly by the developments with machine actionable data management plans. And I believe it's another interesting application of machine actionable data management plans.
I might add,
Alberto. Go ahead, Bob.
I might add too that at NIST, we actually couple electronic data management plans with a data distribution system. So when you actually produce data from your project and you're publishing it through our distribution system, you can link back to the data management plan and carry forward all of the descriptive information about that project automatically. So it's a much more efficient
And it's a great way also to keep track of the documentation of the project. So even, for new people joining the team, etc. So definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy because I think the two of you actually inadvertently or consciously answered a question that I haven't read out yet, but there was a question from the audience, what the connection was between DMPs and citations. And I think you have actually answered it, because there's a track from before the project starts when a DMP is submitted. If it then gets tracked and linked to the output after the project, and then last but not least, if that output is then linked to the citation, you get a full circle of input, output, citation. And both for the incentive as well as for the compliance, that link needs to be in place.
Yes.
So thanks for answering that question already. I think given time, we should move over to Elaine, which actually has the last part of this, because we can talk about tracking and measuring, but we should also talk about training and working with the researchers.